Welcome to the first 100 Days, a show for revenue practitioners by revenue practitioners, giving you unscripted access and tips to help you navigate any new transition or initiative, both in life and at work. You've been with Ada for 3 years. Essentially helped Ada cross multiple chasms. And as a marketer, like everyone reads the Crossing the Chasm. So the fact that you brought the company from Series A to C and achieving the unicorn status in only 3 years is amazing. Is there any tips, advice you can give to marketers or even sales listening to this podcast?
Every company is different. What I will say is that in Ada's case, the urgency from A to B was really more so around volume of pipeline. So how do I build out those systems on the demand or growth side to just put in front of sales as many at-bats as possible? That was the key driver from A to B. That was, when I arrived on the scene at Ada, I just knew that I had to throw as much crap up against the wall as possible to figure out what was going to stick. And then I think from B to C, I started to turn my attention to quality. So, A to B, we kind of turned all the faucets on and the water was flowing. And then from B to C, it was more about what's the quality of the water? Is it the cleanest, best tasting water that we could possibly deliver to sales? And so we started to really refine our strategy, turn our attention more to brand, really define that ICP, and zero in on what was the best quality for sales and that they were able to close with the highest win rate. So that was kind of our progression. And I think that would be my advice right out of the gate. You really just want to pitch your company, your value proposition as many times as possible, because you can't, whatever assumptions you're making without having had that experience are probably wrong. So get in front of as many people as possible. Really test that message and that value proposition, learn the sales motion, then you can start to refine it.
So I want to double click into that a little bit more. You said a lot of assumptions you had, or whoever has it, tend to be wrong, right? So that's why you want to keep testing and testing. So the first question, was there any assumption that you came in or the company had before all of these testing that turned out to be wrong? And what surprised you, essentially?
I'll give you an example, a sort of tangible example. We knew that we wanted to take on consumer-facing verticals. We had some really great customers already in the travel and hospitality space, telco. We thought that banking, insurance, that those were going to be really ripe verticals for us. We didn't know what we didn't know, and we struggled in the beginning to really position ourselves effectively inside of those verticals. We underestimated the compliance consideration, we underestimated the complexity of the sales cycle, the back-end integrations, and what we found after, having lots of at-bats inside of lots of industries, because I didn't constrain my ideal customer profile by industry at that early stage. And what we learned was that we actually were most resonant and most effective inside of digital first industries. So industries like e-commerce, for instance. So we zeroed in on those industries. Now that said, the pendulum's always swinging in marketing and sales between volume and quality. And now we're revisiting those initial industries because we're much more mature. Our product is more sophisticated and robust. We have lots of back-end integrations. We've met certain compliance thresholds. Once we understood the challenges in those industries, we could return to them. But I think that the takeaway is that in those early days, the industries where we thought we would have the greatest traction were not the ones where we actually had the greatest traction.
Got it. I guess it's a tricky balance because for User Gems right now we're at Series A, so we've spent a lot of time trying to understand, define the ICP. Also biased because my background's in product marketing. It's ICP first.
Yes.
But then what you said made sense too, because at the beginning you're still kind of exploring, and it's an early stage of the growth. So you want as many people know about your product as possible, and maybe there's someone outside the ICP that's not ICP now, like in your case, finance. Financial services later on could be ICP. So how do you balance that without the risking spraying and praying and just advertise to everybody?
Yeah, I think it depends on the stage of the company. It depends on your resources. encourage everyone to make data-informed decisions. So internally, you have one point of view. And especially in product marketing, and product marketing sits on my team, you do a lot of research to try to drive the right conclusion. But the best research is really by going through the motions and putting yourself out there and having those conversations. Listen to the sales discussions, do the analysis on the full breadth of pipeline, and use that data to inform how it is you define your ICP. So we were able to see that our win rates inside of digital first industries like ecom or SaaS or fintech, we had way higher win rates. Deal velocity was much higher. Competitive win rates were much higher. That data was sort of the aha moment for us. It was like, oh, okay, now we know what's working. Let's really triple down on that. And then we can go and figure out how we can be more effective in those areas where we're perhaps falling short.
And in order to get that data in the first place, you kind of have to be willing
you have
to
to
go
spray
a little
and pray
bit
a
broad,
little bit.
a
Yeah,
little bit,
exactly.
just to get the data in. Got it.
You got it.
That's great. So from like the B2C, when you talk about the quality, so essentially that's when you kind of hone in and define which industries. Are you still experimenting with other areas, or is C kind of like, now let's just scale up what works?
No, definitely not. I mean, I think what changed for us with the Series C round is that we can really we now have the benefit of being able to take a longer term view of the market. So, before the C, we were much scrappier and it was very much quarter over quarter, and we'd plan maybe 1 year in advance. We'd set the target and then we'd measure very carefully quarter over quarter. I think that the real advantage to having the Series C investment is that we now have lots of runway to go and be bolder and longer term in our thinking and our approach. And so we can experiment more. We can make bigger investments. So absolutely not. We're going to continue, like our bread and butter is going to continue to be where we've proven that ADA fits and the value that we provide. But how do we then expand that and, expand the total addressable market is really what I'm always thinking. So we've played in a slice of the market. How do we continue to expand that market with new marketing experiments, new product, new ICP, all of that stuff, new use cases?
So talking about the experiments, you say marketers should experiment with at least 3 to 4 demand gen channels before optimizing, essentially like recapping your journey from A to C. What has been your most favorite demand gen experiment?
That's a great question. I do think you should always be experimenting. One great experiment that I introduced before I was at ADA in my last role, we worked with a company called Do Good, and they set meetings for you with leaders in your space in exchange for a donation to the charity of their choice, and Do Good organized the whole charitable piece. I thought that was a really novel and creative way to drive interest and actually delivered some interesting results for us. Also helped us to get to know the prospect a little bit, what they cared about. It was a great conversation starter. So that was a great experiment. I think that since COVID, we've experimented a lot at ADA with remote events, as have a lot of other companies. And we actually launched our inaugural ADA conference remotely a few months ago called AC Expo. And it was really a great success for more than 1,000 registrants. So that was an experiment that paid off. And I don't know that we learned any big lessons with remote events. It was really an unexpected and exciting result for us. I think it was just a lot of hard work, and we really decided that we were going to prioritize our customer stories at that event. And I think that was really a big driver of interest. People want to hear from other folks who have experienced success. And so that seemed to really work well.
Got it. So a lot of companies are trying to do like remote events and then like remote, like all the gifting and etc. But since everyone's doing it, it becomes kind of flat now. A lot of conferences. So was there anything that your team discovered in running the events or conferences that maybe surprised the team in terms of like the ROI or feedback even?
Yeah, I think we're still learning. And I think as, this remote paradigm persists, the appetite for remote diminishes. I don't disagree with you. I think remote will continue to be part of the marketing mix, no doubt. But At Ada, I think what matters is that we approach these activities very cross-functionally. It can't just be an events team in a room by themselves driving interest. It needs to straddle product marketing and the customer success organization and the BDR team that is critical in helping to promote, and sales to pull in existing pipeline opportunity and put it on their radar. And so I think it's that cross-functional. And I think actually this is a trend in marketing generally, that everything really needs to be very integrated and coordinated. And the more that you can do that in all of your marketing activities, the greater the likelihood of success.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think
I'll tell you one tip though. One tip from the AC Expo that I think was super effective. We gave everybody a free lunch coupon who participated, and we didn't make the coupon available until lunch started.
Oh,
so
that's cool.
so that was really interesting. People stuck around until lunch. They were excited to get the lunch. We actually had very little drop off on the event, but there was a lot of appreciation from participants that we considered their lunch hour and that we were giving them something to enjoy during that lunch hour.
That is cool. Because I love the virtual conferences, but then how do you mimic the real life in person? And that is one of that. Oh my gosh, that is cool. That is amazing.
I can't take credit for that idea. That was my team. So, shout out to the events team at Ada.
So to piggyback on, you just mentioned about having the business development team roll up within marketing, which I think now is becoming more and more common. And a lot of companies are transitioning BDR, SDR over to marketing. So has it always been the case for Ada that BDR rolls up within marketing? And if not, how did you manage the transition?
Yeah, so it has always been the case pretty much at Ada. When I joined, there was one BDR, and she was on my team when I started. We have now quite a large BDR team. I'm pretty opinionated that the function should sit within marketing. I think it really serves as a healthy forcing function that drives better alignment between sales and marketing. It gives me a deeper line of sight into, the funnel and the leads that I'm delivering to sales, and it gives sales a much better qualified meeting or opportunity because we've touched it several times before it lands in their hands, and it meets a lot of other qualification measures. And so sales can focus on more down funnel activity, which I think is effective as well. So whether you're transitioning from BDR from sales to marketing, or whether you're building it out that way right out of the gate, a few things need to be true in order for it to succeed. The first is that you need a willing sales partner. They have to sort of buy into this paradigm. The second is that there has to be a clear progression path for BDRs into sales. Most BDRs do want that path available to them. So again, you need the sales organization to really be supportive of that. That is absolutely the case at Ada, which is great. And my sales partner is extremely supportive of the model that we have. So I think if those things are true, then it makes a lot of sense for the team to live on marketing.
Got it. I think the part about the career development path, I feel like for BDR, there could be so many different paths. Could be sales, which is the common one. Could also be like BDR leadership, or going to rev ops, sometimes even to marketing. So I feel like that as BDR rolls up within marketing, I'm speaking from a personal perspective as well. That's the part that keeps me up at night. So how do we make sure that they get all the development and coaching so that they can choose and thrive in the path that they select? So in your case, you mentioned that the sales team provide a lot of support so that BDR can transition to AE. Can you share a little bit more on how that cross-functional coaching happen?
Yeah, well, the BDRs work very closely with the AEs. Every BDR is paired to about 3 account executives. So it's not a one-to-one pairing at Ada. I actually don't think a one-to-one pairing is healthy. I think it should be spread a little bit more thin, but not so thin that BDRs are overwhelmed with too many relationships, or vice versa. But they're really working in lockstep with their AE to identify the right accounts. This is for the outbound function. To identify the right accounts, to pursue them the right way, thoughtfully, in coordination with whatever the AE is doing. And then as we progress a BDR through that career path, there's more and more opportunity for them to experience later stage activities. So they might join the AEs on their later stage calls. They'll get some of that coaching and training. And we do have a progression at Ada where you start out in our mid-market organization, and then you might move into leadership positions or more senior positions on that team. Then you'd move into the enterprise organization. You'd similarly progress through the tiers on that team, and then you would move into an AE role. So there is a real progression of responsibility. And the AEs are very involved in that. And then when BDRs are ready to move over, there is an interview process. They, go through the same steps that a net new candidate would go through, and the AEs help them with that process as well.
I love that. Thank you for sharing, because I think I might copy that progression path. In previous companies I worked for, usually it's under sales, so the coaching happens within the team.
Right.
Versus I just want to make sure that there's this handoff.
I think it's not different when it sits inside of marketing. Like I said, as long as the sales leadership is supportive of that progression, it can still happen very organically. But to your earlier point, I think there should be opportunities not only into sales. We have BDRs that have graduated into manager positions on the BDR team. I also have BDRs at Ada that have graduated into the partnerships organization, for instance, or onto the demand. Like I have a BDR recently who moved over onto our demand team. So there should be multiple career paths depending on the interests of the BDR, just like any other role.
That's true. That's great. I took so many notes when I listened to a bunch of podcasts that you did in the past, and in one that you mentioned that marketers always need to be learning and adapting, which as marketers we all know that. But I love what you said about marketer needs to really understand and be honest about what they're good at, and then learn to broaden the skills, but don't lose sight of your core competency. I think it's really great, because a lot of time we tend to focus on where we can improve and trying to be good at everything, but as marketing leader, you can't be good at every single thing underneath it. So I'd love to hear from your story, your journey of broadening the skills, but still not losing sight of your core competency. Sure.
I'm definitely not good. I'm not, really good at everything in marketing. Early in my career as a marketer, it became clear to me that my core competency was writing. That was sort of my superpower. I always used to get feedback along those lines that I was a great writer. It came very easily to me. And I built a whole business off of just that skill for a little while. But I also knew that I really didn't want to be a writer forever. I was curious about too many other things. So I used that skill as, an entry point into new clients, new opportunities, new jobs, but I kept pushing myself into new areas, things that were really outside of my comfort zone that I didn't know, that weren't as familiar. So I got on the front lines of the BDR function, many years ago. I started to dig into product marketing and social. I even, very early in my career, I learned HTML and I built my own website. And all of those net new activities were kind of anchored by my writing skill. I used my writing to really showcase how I could take on this new challenge. And I don't think, candidly, I became expert in any of those other things, but I learned enough to become dangerous and to understand what expertise to bring onto my team that was really going to deliver what we needed. But writing always anchored all of my activities in those early days. And it's what gave me, frankly, the confidence to go and take on new stuff that wasn't as familiar or comfortable. So always come back to your superpower. Figure out what it is. What are you really good at? What comes easily? What do you love doing that you always gravitate back towards? And lean into that while you also grow those things that are less comfortable and familiar.
Is there anything you would have done differently had you turn back the clock?
There's only one thing that I would have done differently, and that would have been second guess myself less and take risk more. I played it safe for a while, and some of that was just a function of circumstance. I was, a new mom. I had a crazy life. I had a daughter with special needs. My attention was very much focused on my family and their needs, and so my career, I needed it to be a little bit steadier. But looking back, it's not so much that I have regrets. It's more that I think I could have gotten further faster if I had been a little bit more eager to take on those risks and get outside of my comfort zone. So I had a bit of imposter syndrome, as many women do, but that's a whole other episode, right?
Yeah. One day I will do like a panel and invite all the female leaders who are super successful, and we'll talk about imposter syndrome, because I feel like every interview I've done so far, everyone says that.
100%.
Yeah, I can't believe it. When you said it, when everyone said it, I'm like, are you serious?
We've all been there. We've all been there. And it's only after we've sort of realized, for me, like later, so much later in my career, that it was so unwarranted. But I don't know that I could have gotten there differently. Like, it was only through those net new experiences and good mentorship and, success through failure that I was able to really realize, like, what was I so scared of? So that's why I don't really regret, because I think it's, a function of the journey.
So for those that like the Ruth of 10, 15 years ago that's going through this right now, and heard what you said and say, okay, I should take more risk. What are some of the things in terms of like risk that they should take?
I think it's very person specific, but I think it's, don't be scared to take on something that you're not convinced you know how to do. The only way you're going to learn how to do it is by going through the motions. And if you fail, by the way, it's okay. Like, that's your opportunity to learn. That's how we get better, is through those challenges and missteps and failures, frankly. So just take it on. And if you're super scared about it, start small. Like, just think about, like, what is something small? Building that first website, and this is honestly going back before websites were easy to build. We're talking like almost 20 years ago. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I just sort of took on the challenge and did it in my bedroom in my spare time, because I wanted to learn, like, what is this all about? How do I do this? So take the risk, figure out what you think you can manage within the context of your life, but don't be scared to do it.
That's great. So my last easy question is, what is your number one do-it-yourself life hack?
Yeah, I don't know that I have life hacks for do-it-yourself. I think the best way to learn and understand anything, obviously, is to do it yourself. But oftentimes, if you want to move quickly or you need to move quickly, the best DIY hack is to find somebody who knows how to do it better and then get them to do it for you. If you can't get them to do it for you, then copy them. That would be my hack. Not everything needs a new playbook. There's some things, you want to be fresh, you want to be innovative, but some things just work already, and it's okay to copy those things.